Hello, everybody. My name is Ajay Swami. I am a senior product lead with Amazon Web Services. And today I'll be talking about something a little different. We'll be talking today about product management with an offshore team. Essentially, I'll be presenting to you the framework and the selection criteria for engaging with an offshore partner, and then what you need to look out for in terms of culture, communication, and managing for success. So let's get started. So here's today's agenda. There's 5 main topics. I'm going to start off with the macro level scenario of what's happening today in terms of the great attrition. I'll explain to you what that is. Number 2, we'll go through the framework and the criteria for selecting an offshore team. Number 3, we'll talk about some of the must-haves in terms of communication and what to expect in terms of culture and how you want to handle that. Fourth, we'll talk about managing for success, what that means in terms of tracking and measuring your goals, and also looking out for risks and how you want to mitigate for some of those risks. And finally, we'll end with takeaways. A quick note on what this webinar is not. Number 1, I'm not going to go through how you're going to build your digital startup. I'm not going to be talking about the business canvas or anything along those lines. I also won't be talking about how to validate your ideas, get product market fit, or even scale your startup if you have indeed sort of launched your products. Some of the assumptions today is that you're interested in looking to hire an offshoring team for your startup. You want a framework to make sure you're making the right decisions so you don't lose time and or money by hiring the wrong team or a team that is not the right fit for you. And then lastly, you'll want to learn about managing people in other countries. So there's this notion of the great attrition. If you look at the graph on the left, you'll see that McKinsey & Company states that around 40% of employees are unhappy with their current jobs and they want to leave their job in their next 3 to 6 months. And on the right-hand side, you can see that how that equates to a rise in entrepreneurship and risk-taking. For example, in the first half of 2021, Americans filed for paperwork to start around 4.3 million businesses, which is fantastic. You can also see an increase in venture capital. Venture capital has hit an all-time high in the first half of 2021, and it's close to around $300 billion invested, which is amazing. And then lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused significant changes in how we work, how we talk to each other, how we collaborate. And that means that, listen, we have time for ourselves, we have time for our families, and we also have time to take a few risks. And that means that people are more open to the notion of, side hustles or taking jobs on the side or trying to experiment with new ideas or trying to start their own new digital startups. So let's talk about the framework for selecting an offshore team. I've broken down this framework into 2 buckets. The first one is the technology and the team criteria. And the second one is business criteria. They're both equally important, and I don't think we should be discounting any of these criteria. So let's start with the top one, which is technology and the team criteria. So when you're looking to engage an offshore team, obviously the key facet you need to look at is the technology prowess. Most startups that are built today, most digital products, they're built in the cloud. There's no reason why you should be building anything on premise or within a data center. So cloud expertise with an offshore vendor is absolutely foundational, and you need to make sure that they have the necessary knowledge in order to actually build your application or your digital product directly in the cloud. You also want to make sure that the languages that they use, your programming language that they use, are new. So you need to make sure that they're not using older languages, because this can lead to risk in terms of building technical debt. And also it's really hard to find people in the future to maintain that code base or make some changes in case you need to fix something in the future. Number three, look into databases. There's a lot of free open source databases today, so there's no reason why you should be paying for any database service. A cloud offers a variety of free options. And then lastly, is your partner or your offshore vendor, do they have technical architects? Can they help you think through what the best architecture is for your growth? Can they come up with that best-in-class architecture? That's something key that you should think about if you're trying to build towards the future. Number two is user experience. If you don't have a designer on team, you might want to engage a vendor with experience in UI design. In some cases, there might be digital agencies, offshore agencies that might actually do the entire end-to-end user journey mapping, which is a fantastic resource to have. You might also want to have designers on your team that are well-versed in wireframing and UI design. And then lastly, you might also want to look into expertise or capabilities in graphic design. This might be handy when you want to start to design logos, or you want to design non-digital products such as brochures or flyers. Point number C. This is a very important one, and this is about team and culture. You want to engage a team that is experienced, that has a ton of experience, but also well-balanced. You want to make sure there's a good fit of top, well-experienced people leading lesser tenured people. You definitely don't want to hire a team of folks that have a couple of years experience, because that can just lead to bad decisions. Number two, think about the language. What is your primary language that you want to work in? If it's English, make sure it's the offshore partner can speak it fluently, they can communicate and write fluently, and that it makes sense for you to actually comfortably explain complex subject matter in English. And number three is culture fit. What does it mean for you in terms of culture fit? Are you the kind of organization, or are you the kind of startup that values structure, or are you more loosely architected in terms of building your products? You want to try and match up those, the way you operate and the way you think and the way you communicate with the offshore vendor team. And there's some pointers that I'll go through when it comes to culture. Point number D is project management. Project management is the bread and butter. Without good project management, you will not hit your deliverables. So make sure the offshore partner is familiar with agile methodologies. They're able to adhere to cadence and milestones. And then also that you're able to sort of address risks from the beginning, and you're able to mitigate them through the course of your project. E is support. What does it mean when you actually build your digital products? Is the work done? Probably not. You'll have to go through bug fixes. You'll probably have some functional and non-functional errors. What kind of support will your offshore partner provide in helping you mitigate some of these risks and these errors, and making sure that your product is functional and provides a good user experience without any errors to your customers? Moving on to business criteria, there's 4 buckets here. The first one is legal and regulatory, which is very, very fundamental. Number 1, if your idea for a new startup is very closely guarded, make sure you sign an NDA, right? If you're going to be sharing key IP, key research material, key user journeys, key algorithms, whatever it is, you want to make sure that NDA is signed and that NDA is strong enough to uphold your intellectual property. Number two, make sure you sign a master services agreement, an MSA, and make sure that this agreement covers all facets of the contracts. All right, you should have provisions for delivering with a certain level of quality. You should have language for delays, and make sure you cover all of the ground in order to make sure that your project is successfully delivered. And then lastly, this is an interesting one to look out for. If, for example, you're in the healthcare space and you're a startup that's operating in the healthcare space, you want to try and see if the vendor is able to provide you with any HIPAA-related certifications or HIPAA-related capabilities, the way you store data, the way you access data, etc. This will become very key for you as you use the offshore vendor to actually go live with your product. The second part of it is probably the most important piece of it all, and this is where people tend to also over-index. It's pricing. There is variances in pricing across different countries. So you might see pricing in the Philippines and other regions be a little bit more expensive than pricing in, for example, Bangladesh. India, for example, is quite saturated in terms of offshoring, and you might see increased pricing there. You might see cheaper pricing in sort of the Baltic region. But however, whatever the pricing is, if you follow the framework that I've laid out above, you will be able to actually find a partner within your price range. And then you will be able to deliver a quality project or a quality product based on your needs. But there's two things you need to look out for: hourly versus fixed pricing. Hourly pricing means that you need to have a very good eye, a very active eye in terms of the work being done. Everything is going to be tracked on an hourly basis, and you need to make sure that everything is being accounted for. Fixed pricing, however, might give you a little bit of leeway in terms of being able to be a little free with the scope. Yes, there might be charges for scope changes, etc., but fixed will actually give you the opportunity to actually have a boundary around your pricing, and you're able to deliver a good quality MVP within that pricing. So think about pricing and what it means to you and what works for you. We're going to talk about measuring success in greater detail in the next couple of slides, but be very clear in your mind about what your objectives are and what those milestones are for you to achieve those objectives. If you're not clear, your offshore partner is not going to be clear. And you need to communicate with clarity. And this is something that I talk about all the time. Over-index on clarity in terms of what it means to you and what constitutes success for you. And then lastly, security. Security to me is not a technology criteria. It's a business criteria. Data security is paramount. PII information, people's personal information, etc. There's compliance around that. I need to make sure that the offshore partner that you actually select is able to abide by some of those security frameworks. So that's something key that you need to look into as well. And then lastly, you have two boxes on the bottom, which I think you should do regardless of whether you go through all of the buckets of the framework or not. Always ask for references, and then always ask for examples of work. So as an example on how you want to select an offshoring partner, you can go to websites such as Upwork, and you can utilize the framework that I've provided in order to select, excuse me, in order to select an offshore team. So here I've sort of laid out a two-step process in order to actually pick your offshoring partner. So for example, if you're on Upwork, what you want to do is create a matrix in terms of the actual vendor. What is their average Upwork customer rating? What is the total amount of work that they've done that they've done on Upwork? Is it in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, or is it just in a few thousands of dollars? The more, the better, because that means that they are a vendor that has been vastly engaged and is more experienced. Also, try and get examples of the partner's work. Make sure these are not demos or screenshots. See if you can actually access publicly referenceable websites and see if they're actually live currently. You don't want to look at websites or demos that have been built in the past, because that doesn't necessarily give you an indication of a product that's actually still being used today. And then lastly, look at the pricing range. Pricing range in terms of both fixed and hourly, like I mentioned before. Based on that, you'll probably be able to select 5 to 10 partners, and then you probably want to deep dive with the top partners that you selected. So there's a framework on slide 11 that I'll go through at the end of the webinar, but you want to rank your partners based on the framework from the previous slide. So rank them based on the technology fit, what I mentioned in terms of whether they're cloud native, whether they use the most modern languages, whether they are able to provide architecture advisory. Rank them in terms of how important is it for you to get user experience and UI designs. Rank them in terms of culture and communication. Rank them in terms of whether they prefer Scrum or whether they prefer Kanban in terms of an agile methodology. See how they fit your regulatory needs in terms of your IP protection, your data protection, your customer private information protection needs. Obviously, you might want to weight pricing a little bit higher if that is important to you. Also look at their security posture in terms of how they handle security. Are things encrypted? Are things are not encrypted? How that could impact the data for your needs. And then lastly, see if there are publicly referenceable customers. The more, the better. And then eventually, based on that, you will have 2 to 3 partners that bubble up towards the top. And at that point, you can actually start to have deeper conversations and then eventually pick your offshoring partner. So this is a very important subject for me, culture and communication. One of the things that we tend to do when working with offshore partners is we tend to discount their engagement. We tend to discount their importance. We maybe even tend to or talk over them when we're trying to collaborate with them. And this might be because of either the offshore partner is not comfortable or is probably shy in speaking up, or it might be because of the fact that the offshore partner is subservient towards their clients, or it might be because the offshore partner might not have a great command of the English language and they might struggle to actually get their points across. So having said that, always be empathetic. This will actually take you a long way in terms of ensuring that your project will be successful. But let's go to some of these buckets here. Language. Language is fundamental, obviously. Make sure that the partner is able to demonstrate a solid command of the language that you want them to be proficient in. Make sure that the partner understands that you have changing business priorities. As a startup, you will have to change direction. You will have to change scope. You will have to make user flow changes, etc. And make sure they're okay with that. Make sure that they're not too rigid, and ensure that you get alignment on that. The teams that the offshore partner provides, they should be high performing. A mix of various experience is always key. Make sure the team members are not too junior. Make sure it's a good mix of senior tech leads sprinkled with mid to junior level team members. So you get a good mix of folks that are able to lead and deliver. Transparency, this is key. The tooling that you use, whether it's in terms of Jira or Asana, along with the manner that you collaborate, will allow you to be really, really thoughtful and transparent in terms of how you communicate with your partner, how you raise risks, how you look at costs, and how you want to refine your budgets. This is important because if there are changes to your project, if there's unforeseen circumstances, technical circumstances that you might not have known, you want the partner to be able to come to you and say, hey, look, we might want to spend a little bit more time here, and we don't want to take a shortcut just because of the fact that this might take a longer time, which might mean increased cost. So open up that door and make sure that you're transparent with your partner so they actually bring their best capabilities forward in terms of suggesting the best technologies. Culture of quality, make sure the partner understands that quality is paramount. You want to be able to take hold of digital products that's bug free, that works, that is scalable and robust. That has to be that's fundamental. Anything less, you should not accept that. Again, as I said before, always over index on clarity. Clarity is everything. Be explicit in your ask, be clear, don't be verbose, get to the point, and be very, very clear in terms of what your ask is. Even in writing, sometimes your message can get misconstrued. So if something is not clear, call up your partner, speak to them, or record a video and send it on Slack. If it's a time gap that's too long and you can't communicate with them often, send a video. So be clear and be explicit. And then lastly, like I said before, empower your partner. The more you empower your partner, the more they'll come to you with solutions and innovation. You want to optimize for two-sided communication. You want to collaborate with them and treat them as equals. So how do we manage for success? There's two key elements for me when I think about managing an offshore product initiative. One is, listen, you have to employ Agile, okay? You have to employ Agile, otherwise you won't be able to pivot fast enough, you won't be able to change things, and things will be too rigid. Number two, align on tooling. You want to consider tooling in terms of not just Agile, whether it's Jira or Asana, but you also want to think about what it means to communicate asynchronously. Do you want to use Slack? Do you want to use Teams? Do you want to use WhatsApp? Or a combination of the above? Just dictate and be structured in terms of how and where you want the communication to happen. Number three, this should go without saying, follow the Agile methodology, create weekly sprints, create your behavioral driven stories, create your acceptance criteria, create the what if scenarios of things that might go wrong for. Make sure you over index on clarity, because the team on the other end, they're not going to know exactly what's in your head. And your job is to get it down to them in as much granular fashion as possible, whether it's through wireframes, rough sketches, screenshots, texts, etc., and make the job easier for them so they understand the logic and your thought process behind why you're writing a story a particular way or why you want a feature delivered a particular way. And then lastly, have retrospectives, have open conversations about what's working well and what's not working well, and make that a two-sided conversation. You might see that if you empower your partner, they might say, hey, your clarifications or your requirements are not granular enough, or they're not detailed enough. you need to do a better job there. So you want to be able to receive feedback along those lines, and that's just going to make your the delivery of your product more successful. So how do you measure for some of this stuff? You want to get involved in terms of backlog grooming and sizing and estimating with your partners. Ask questions. Ask them why a particular story takes X amount of points versus another one. Understand relative sizing. If two stories are somewhat similar and one story is twice is estimated to take twice as longer as the other, ask them why. Also track the time that the team spends on stories, and understand where there are big gaps in variances. And you might want to ask why a story that took maybe 2 hours to complete took 7 hours. There might be something that we missed in terms of estimating. These are things that can be rectified, and these are things that you should be open about. Also, measure your average realized productivity increase, i.e., how much stories are being delivered, what is the velocity? Track your quality. How many bugs are we introducing after each sprint? As the team gets better, as you start to improve your development, the offshore team should optimize for quality, and they should be able to do that as you get better at detailing your product requirements, and as they also start to embrace test-driven development. And then lastly, make sure that the sprints are marching towards your milestones. And if it's not, you need to pause, you need to rethink and ask why the progress is not being made as planned. So this next slide, this slide is about mitigating risks. What are some of the risks that you're going to encounter with your offshore team? The first one is what I like to call control and schedule risks. If as you engage with the offshore team, you want to make sure that there's disciplined project management and there's an adherence to cadence and milestones. If those start to slip, obviously your delivery timeline can slip. Lack of product management standards is obviously implies that your delivery is not going to be met on time. So make sure you always keep an eye on that. And then lackadaisical agile management. What I mean by that is sometimes people misconstrue agile to mean free or freedom or being able to move without structure. And nothing can be further than the truth. Agile means, yes, you should be able to move quickly and move with the business, but that does not mean no structure or no discipline. So make sure you keep an eye out on the project management side of things. Number two, we talked about quality quite a lot. Make sure that through your sprints, your quality is increasing, i.e. your bug counts are decreasing. And if that's not the case, you need to have a chat with your partner and think about and talk about being test-driven development. You need to test first before you actually accept a particular feature as being a release candidate. Number two is the partner or the offshore partner misunderstanding your requirements. Again, I'm harping on this over and over again, but over-index on clarity. The third risk I talk about is technical debt. The lack of cloud knowledge sometimes can have consequences. And what I mean by that is sometimes an offshore partner that is not necessarily aware of all of the services that is available on Amazon Web Services or on Azure or on Google Cloud might intend to use some legacy technologies. So for example, they might use a third-party mail provider when all of these services actually exist natively within an existing cloud provider. So make sure that you're not increasing technical debt or you're not increasing third-party partnerships, costs, when you can all sort of be contained within a particular cloud environment. Number two, make sure that any architectural decisions being made are not done hastily. And if you need to bring in any expertise from the offshore team or from somebody on your side to vet some of those architecture decisions, you should do that because this can impact you in the future. Security risk. We talked about this quite a bit. This is in terms of data security, data encryption. Make sure your data is safeguarded. Make sure the offshore team does not have access to your production environments. Make sure you're not using real client data or customer data in your non-production environments. And also safeguard your IP risk. Your intellectual property is key for you to protect. And that's done through NDAs, that's done through secure folders, make sure things are not shared, things are password protected, etc. To use the rigor to actually make sure that all of these things are secure. And then lastly, team risk. There are cases in offshore teams where there's frequent turnover, which leads to lack of continuity. So make sure when you discuss with your partner and say, hey, look, let's try and minimize any people leaving the team up until we've delivered my product over the course of the next 6 months. If there is a team change, if there is a change in terms of a senior technical leader, let's make sure that there is a knowledge transfer process that's well documented and well developed and mature. So there's no time lost in being able to pick up the pieces and get going with the development. So this brings us to the end. So some of the key takeaways are, number one, do your due diligence. This is your product. This is your initiative. Take control. Do not compromise. Quality is paramount. Number two, in terms of culture and communication, offshore teams and their engineers are intelligent. They probably go through the same level of schooling. They have the same experience in terms of technologies. And they are equally as proficient. Their command of the English language might not be the same, so be empathetic, be patient, and again, over-index on clarity. Number three, track and measure. Always track how things are going, and then measure to make sure that you're progressing in the right direction and not backwards. And then lastly, communication. Communicate both synchronously and asynchronously. So if you're unable to have calls 3 times a week and you can only speak to your offshore vendor or partner once a week, that's fine. But let's make sure that the rest of the things that you need to communicate with the team are done asynchronously, either through video or voice memos and wireframes and a combination of screenshots, text, etc. So they have all of the information that they need, and everything is detailed enough. So this brings us to an end. I want to share one last slide here. This is sort of the model for actually picking an offshore partner. So if you can see here, you can very quickly build this in Google Sheets. So for example, you have 4 scores for 4 values for scoring. 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 is does not offer the offshore partner does not offer a particular feature. Their capability is below expectations, meets expectations, or exceeds expectations. And you want to rank them on a scale of 1 to 3 or 0 to 3 for each of these vendors across all of these different frameworks. And at the end of the day, the overall score, at least quantitatively, will tell you which the top vendors are. And after that, it's really for you to have that conversation with that particular offshore vendor and make a decision. So that brings us to the end. I hope this was useful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. Thank you.